It was supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime. 22-year-old Jake Thompson, an avid young hiker from Colorado, set out last summer to conquer the rugged trails of Grand Teton National Park. He had planned every step. His backpack was packed with essentials, his phone loaded with trail maps, and his camera ready to capture breathtaking views. But somewhere between the towering peaks and endless pine forests, Jake vanished without a trace. For months, search teams combed the mountains, helicopters scanned the vast wilderness, and Jake's family refused to give up hope. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the trail went cold, and Jake became just another name on the long list of hikers who never made it home. Then, nearly a year later, something strange happened. Ranger Mark Collins, a seasoned park ranger who'd spent most of his life in these wild lands, was doing a routine check near a remote cliff when he noticed an enormous eagle's nest perched high above the valley floor. From below, he spotted something odd tangled within the sticks and feathers, something that didn't belong. Driven by a feeling he couldn't quite explain, Mark climbed up to the precarious ledge to get a closer look. What he found inside. That nest would shock not just him, but everyone who had followed Jake's story for nearly 11 months. As Mark pulled out the mysterious item, questions rushed back like a storm. How did it get there? What really happened to Jake that day in the mountains? And could this hidden clue finally lead to the truth behind his disappearance? Stay with me as we unravel this chilling mystery and discover what secrets the Grand Teton still keeps hidden among its highest peaks. Jake wasn't just any hiker. He grew up exploring the Rockies with his dad, who taught him how to read the land and respect its hidden dangers. Friends described him as fearless but smart, someone who never took risks without a plan. That's why, when he didn't return on time, people immediately knew something was wrong. The search teams found his parked car at the trailhead, untouched. His camping permit showed he planned to spend 2 nights near Cascade Canyon, a spot known for stunning views and rough terrain. But beyond that, no one knew which way he'd gone. For days, volunteers and rangers searched every ridge and ravine, calling out his name, hoping to spot his bright red jacket. They found bits of evidence, a torn map, a snack wrapper even, a footprint near a stream, but no sign of Jake himself. As winter set in, heavy snow buried any hope of new clues. His parents held on to every rumor and tip, but none of it led anywhere. Some locals whispered about hidden caves or old mining, tunnels deep in the Tetons where people could vanish forever. Others blamed wild animals or sudden storms that can sweep in without warning. But that strange object in the eagle's nest changed everything. Ranger Mark held it in his gloved hands, his mind racing. It was Jake's camera, battered and scratched, but still in one piece. He knew the memory card inside could hold the last moments before Jake disappeared. Why was it up there, tangled in an eagle's massive home? Did Jake drop it while climbing, or was there something else at play? Mark radioed his team, but deep down he wondered if they were ready for what they might find when they looked at those final photos. The mountains weren't done with their secrets yet. Back at the ranger station, Mark placed Jake's weather-beaten camera on his desk like it was something fragile and alive. He called Jake's parents first. They drove through the night, arriving before sunrise with red eyes and trembling hands. Everyone gathered around as Mark carefully opened the camera and removed the memory card. There was a part of him that hoped the photos would clear things up. But another part feared they would only raise more questions. While the photos were being recovered, word spread quickly through the small town near Grand Teton. Locals who had nearly forgotten the missing hiker's story suddenly remembered every rumor they'd heard. Some people claimed they'd seen Jake talking to a stranger at a gas station the night before he vanished. A few swore they'd found strange footprints near an old ranger cabin deep in the woods, and there was talk of a hidden trail one, not marked on any map, that only seasoned climbers whispered about around campfires. as the ranger team looked through the images. Blurry shots of the towering mountains and winding trails flicked across the screen. Then there were selfies. Jake smiling in front of a waterfall, perched on a rock ledge, the sun behind him. But the last few photos were different. They showed something in the distance, a dark shape between the trees, half hidden in the lock. Shadows. It looked like a person, but the face was turned away. Almost like it was watching Jake without him noticing. Jake's mother pressed her hand to her mouth. Who was that figure? Was it another hiker, or someone who shouldn't have been there at all? And why did Jake keep taking photos of it? Mark knew they had to head back up the mountain, retrace Jake's last steps, and maybe find that hidden trail everyone was too scared to talk about. But what if the thing or person Jake saw was still up there, waiting in the vast wilderness where secrets can hide forever? The next morning, the search team loaded up their gear before dawn. Ranger Mark, Jake's father, and 2 seasoned trackers made their way back to the trailhead where Jake's car still sat. A ghost of that day 11 months ago. The air was thin and sharp, carrying the scent of pine and distant storms. Every step deeper into the Grand Teton wilderness made the group feel smaller against the endless peaks. They followed the path Jake must have taken, comparing the photos. On his camera, with the landmarks around them, the same waterfall, the same rock ledge. Even the bend in the trail where the shadowy figure first appeared in the background. The deeper they went, the clearer it became that Jake hadn't wandered off by accident. There were signs he'd gone off the main trail on purpose, fresh claw marks on a tree, an old boot print hidden under a mossy log, and strange rock piles that didn't look natural at all. As they reached the edge of Cascade Canyon, the wind picked up, howling through the cliffs like a warning. The trackers signaled for the group to stop. Ahead, hidden behind a thick wall of pine trees, was an opening in the rocks, almost invisible if you didn't know where to look. It matched a rumor Mark had heard years ago about a forgotten miner's tunnel from the 1800s. Sealed off after a collapse, but still whispered about by hunters and old guides. Jake's dad stared at the dark entrance, his breath visible in the cold air. He came here, he whispered. He must have seen something, or someone, that led him inside. Mark shone his flashlight into the black tunnel. The beam disappeared into endless darkness. Somewhere deep in that silence, the truth about what happened to Jake was waiting, but so was something else, something the mountains had kept hidden all this time. Taking a deep breath, they stepped inside, each footstep echoing louder than the last, as the walls seemed to close in around them. Whatever they were about to find, there was no turning back now. The narrow tunnel seemed to swallow their light hole. Each step echoed through the damp darkness, bouncing off the crumbling stone walls. Mark led the way, sweeping his flashlight over old wooden beams and rusted mining tools left behind decades ago. Jake's dad clutched the last photo from the camera, the blurry figure staring back at him like a warning. About 50 feet in, they stumbled on something none of them expected. A makeshift camp. An old tarp, torn and half buried under dust and rocks, lay beside a pile of ashes that might have once been a fire. Scattered around it were broken branches, scraps of food wrappers, and, most chilling of all, an old, weathered notebook half buried. Under a stone, Mark picked it up with shaking hands. The cover was damp and stained, but inside, the pages were packed with cramped writing. The notes weren't Jake's. The handwriting was rough and erratic, with lines scribbled out and words that barely made sense. It talked about watching, waiting, keeping the mountain's secret safe. Some pages mentioned a path only. The marked ones confined and warned about voices in the canyon at night. Jake's dad looked around, his eyes wide. Who had been living here? Was it the figure in Jake's photos? Suddenly, one of the trackers signaled for silence. In the distance, deeper in the tunnel, a faint tapping echoed through the stone. Steady, almost rhythmic, like someone or something was working in the dark. The group froze, listening. The tapping stopped, replaced by a low rustle, as if someone was moving just beyond their light. Mark motioned to kill the flashlights. They stood in pitch black, hearts pounding, straining to hear. Somewhere in that suffocating darkness, the truth about Jake's disappearance and whoever or whatever had been following him waited, just out of reach. But the deeper they pushed into the mountain, the clearer it became that they weren't just hunting for answers anymore. They were being watched, and whoever was out there knew these hidden tunnels far better than any of them ever could. Mark flicked his flashlight back on, sweeping the beam across the tunnel walls as the tapping sound vanished into silence. The group moved forward slowly, each footstep crunching on loose gravel, breath shallow in the cold, damp air. Deeper in, the tunnel opened into a hidden chamber, an old mining room with collapsed beams and rusty rails half buried in dust. And there, in the center, was what they had been searching for all along. Jake's backpack leaned against the wall, its bright red straps faded but unmistakable. Beside it, a small pile of belongings, his water bottle, a torn jacket, and a journal. Jake's dad rushed forward, grabbing the journal with trembling hands. The first page was smudged, but clear enough to read. Jake had written about following the shadowy figure, believing it was another hiker in trouble. He described how the figure led him off the main trail, deeper and deeper into the hidden paths of the canyon, until he realized, too late, he was lost. Then Mark's light caught something else, movement in the shadows. At the far end of the chamber, a figure stepped forward, pale and thin, clothes ragged and eyes wide in the glare. It was a man, older than Jake, with a scruffy beard and cracked lips. He looked at them like they were ghosts. In a raspy voice, he whispered that he'd been hiding there for years, claiming the mountain chose him to protect its secrets. He'd watched Jake stumble into his hidden world, and, afraid Jake would expose the tunnels, he'd chased him off the cliff edge. He never meant to kill him, only scare him. But Jake slipped. Jake's dad sank to his knees as the man kept muttering about the eagle's nest. He'd climbed up to hide the camera, believing the mountain demanded it be kept safe. Mark radioed for backup as the strange hermit sat down on the cold stone floor, mumbling to himself. But just as they thought they had all the answers, Mark's flashlight flicked up to the chamber wall, and there, half hidden behind rotten beams, was a narrow passage leading even deeper into the mountain. Fresh footprints in the dust led inside. Whoever or whatever was living in these tunnels with the hermit wasn't alone. The truth about what else lay buried in Grand Teton was far from over, and some secrets were never meant to be found. Mark stood frozen at the mouth of the narrow passage, the cold air from the deeper tunnel brushing against his face like a final warning. But this time, they knew when to stop. He turned back to Jake's father, who sat holding his son's journal, like a piece of him had finally come home. They knew Jake's fate now. It wasn't the ending they'd prayed for, but it was an answer that would let them lay him to rest in the place he loved most. The hermit was taken into custody, his ramblings pieced together to help the rangers map the forgotten tunnels. He talked about the hidden paths under the Grand Teton, how he'd survived off stray supplies left behind by hikers, always moving in the shadows. Some called him dangerous, others pitied him. But in the end, he was just another soul lost to the wilderness. The strange footprints deeper inside the tunnel were never fully explained. A second search found signs of old mining activity and abandoned tools, but no other people. Maybe the mountain still kept a few secrets hidden, as it always had. Jake's parents held a small service on a quiet ridge overlooking Cascade Canyon, where the wind seemed to carry his spirit across the peaks he once dreamed of climbing. Mark stood beside them, watching the sun set behind the mountains, a soft orange glow washing over the same trails Jake's boots had once crossed. In the end, Jake's story reminded everyone that the wild places we love can take as much as they give. The Grand Teton remains beautiful, dangerous, and full of secrets waiting for the next curious soul. For Jake, the mountain was freedom, and now, in its quiet, endless reach, he'd become part of it forever.